when we first presented this to an attorney, there's just so much information. It's almost impossible to digest in one sitting, as you well know.
I've experienced this, actually.
Yeah.
Life's Third Act is a podcast dedicated to helping you get the most out of your retirement. Sponsored by Tucker Allen. Here's attorney CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of Life's Third Act. I want to take a few minutes and introduce the next two episodes that you'll be seeing. In order to do that, I need to go back and kind of give you a more bird's eye view of this series. You know that we've, for the last several months or so, and we'll continue to do so, I think, indefinitely, we don't have any plans to change the focus on step parents, step families, and how you do estate planning around that. So we've kind of been focusing on some of the unique challenges associated with that. And no better examples can we find, of course, than among the rich and famous. While their circumstances are grander often, the fundamental rules we know are applicable to all of us, rich or poor. So I wanted to introduce this because it is a little complicated. Some of you will walk away thinking, wow, my head is still spinning. Well, to some extent, Justin, our heads are spinning a little bit from this.
We were having a long conversation of recap.
Yeah. So we started by doing a segment. Actually, it ended up being two episodes about Glen Campbell. Glen Campbell, he was a guy who, of course, was very successful, had a lot of intellectual property, copyrights from his many hits, Galveston,
Wichita Lineman.
And so he was he had accumulated a lot of value in terms of his catalog of music, his recordings, as well as his brand name, etc. So Glen married Billie Jean in 1959, and he was married to Billie Jean up until 76. So during this period of time was when almost all of the hits, with perhaps one exception, were recorded, and the money that was generated associated with that occurred during the course of the marriage. And there was some other investments. I mean, Glen at the time was doing very well, and as commonly happens among celebrities, is you have financial advisors who step into the picture, and they will often advise and suggest certain investments. So it's not unusual for people who are making money from their copyrights, royalties, other forms of intellectual property. They'll often also be investing money in real estate and other things. So it's not surprising that when this divorce came in 1976, that there was a lot of assets. And this occurred in the state of California, which is a community property state. So the presumption is that anything that was acquired during the course of the marriage is divided 50-50. So that means that Billie Jean, the wife he was divorcing, and his wife of 17 years or so, that she was in a position to be awarded a substantial amount of assets. And while that's a good thing, and I think it's right and fair in the case of a divorce, of a long marriage like that, I think one of the things that you'll learn as we walk through these next two episodes is that those things are not self-enforcing. In other words, what happens in a divorce decree where you divide up the assets and there are documents created in which it indicates what the final decree is. Those documents should be filed in the appropriate places, copies sent to the appropriate entities in order to have funds that would otherwise have gone to the husband, for example, will now go 50% to the wife. So there's work that has to be done after that, as well as policing those things. Well, in this case, the gavel went down, the property was divided. This was in 76. Billie Jean lived until 93. And I should mention here there were three children that were born of that marriage, Travis, Kelly, and Kane. And those three children were the beneficiaries of Billie Jean's trust that she had created during her lifetime to be the beneficiaries when she died in 93. So you have this divorce that occurs in 76, or maybe technically 77, and then you have this period of time when Billie Jean's alive and presumably receiving the correct amount of money from these record companies who are paying the money through a business manager for Glen Campbell, who is supposed to pay the money to Billie Jean. There's still questions in the air about whether that accounting was ever done fully correctly. It is true that Billie Jean was in a position and did police that better, perhaps, or was better able to police it than the children, the situation the children found themselves in after 1993. So there is this period of time up to 93 that we won't spend a lot of time talking about. It's just too remote. The records aren't there. There's a question of statute of limitations. It's just very complicated. So what happened when we get to 93, though, is then we talk about, well, what about the rights that would inure to the children by virtue of her will and trust, and especially the trust. She was very conscientious about creating this document that would protect the assets, protect the children, all the things that we advocate, quite frankly, whenever we talk about the importance of trust in estate planning. So nonetheless, the children inherited a situation where suddenly the obligation existed for them to become managers of sorts. And this is my complaint about the system as it exists now, and for which I don't have an easy solution, except that you appoint people who you know as trustees will be very vigorous and aggressive in protecting the interest of their wards, which of course are the beneficiaries. In this case, there was a trustee, a lawyer, and that lawyer was collecting checks, essentially, or rather checks were being sent to the trust received by the lawyer from the business manager of Glen Campbell. And this business manager was in turn receiving checks from a record company. So I won't go into the details here because this is what we're going to talk about during these next two episodes. But I want to give you a heads up of the big picture. So what interested us when we were doing this original interview about Glen Campbell is that we got a call from Travis. And this is unusual for us. We've not had, Justin, I don't think we've ever had this happen where a family member calls us, and it was great, meaning Travis had watched the episodes that we had done on Glen Campbell, and he's a great guy. He's very protective of his dad's reputation, huge fan, of course, of his dad, and he watched it from an insider's perspective, and he had a lot of good things to say to us, incidentally. But he also had some things to say. He said, I think that this should have been said differently, or no, this wasn't quite right. So though in its entirety, his communication with us was very favorable. But I thought the points that he raised were really good ones. As a matter of fact, it opened a door to these issues that you'll hear much more about in these next two episodes. And it was so complicated as we started talking that we thought, we can't simply do one episode. We need to do several in order to cover this subject. So we've done the episode that has included Trudy and Travis, and they gave us a lot of information about this period of time. But now we've done an episode that's divided into, it'll be two episodes actually, as one single interview. And that was with Travis and Kelly. Kelly is one of his siblings. So together they give us some understanding of the challenges of monitoring one's rights and one's property in a world where you have big corporations, you have lawyers, you have arcane rules, you have litigation that's incredibly expensive, and the other side has the capacity to wage war, quite frankly, more effectively typically than you as a complaining beneficiary would typically have. So it kind of introduces you to the challenges of the loved ones, subsequent generations of celebrities and other artists who leave behind these intangible assets that are only of value to the extent that you can have the obligated organizations, whether it's record companies, whether it's movie production studios, whether it's their lawyers, agents, the agents or other representatives of the estate where there may have been assets that were sold and you're still entitled to receive money, but you're now to get it from this third party, not the record company, not the recording studio, but a third party. Catalogs get bought and sold. We read about that regularly, how How I think, what was it so most recent? Bob Dylan's catalog sold for what, 400 million or so? It's a big number. So if Bob Dylan had passed away, or when he does pass away, then his children will need to deal with this third entity in some way. So the challenge is to have people who are appointed to run a trust or to protect your interests in a way that they're qualified to do it, they're motivated to do it, they're capable of doing it, meaning they have to have the resources, they have to have the legal authority, et cetera. So trustees have that, people with durable powers of attorney have that, people who are appointed as guardians, et cetera, have authority. But it's no easy thing. It's one thing for the gavel to go down in a divorce in 1976 awarding rights. And then you'll see as this story unfolds how complicated and frustrating and challenging it is thereafter to retain and enforce those rights. So these next two episodes kind of continue along the road that we did in the most recent episode, which was with Travis and Trudy, his wife. And I think you'll find these just fascinating, especially when you view this whole series in its totality. So I hope that you find it interesting and enjoyable and that you learn something useful. Enjoy.
It's so wild because today I found a whole bunch more. I've been digitizing all the old reel-to-reels and stuff, and I found another pile today. Look at this, Travis. Oh, my goodness. The Queen's birthday, 1970. Queen of
Elizabeth.
England.
Yeah, when Dad went over there.
Yeah, he played for her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the Queen's birthday. Pretty cool, huh? And then a reel-to-reel from the White House.
Nixon.
That would have been Nixon.
What was your dad a little bit of a Republican?
Yeah.
He was a Democrat up until Reagan ran for election. He was always a Democrat until then.
Yeah, well.
And then he voted for Reagan.
I think a lot of Democrats did that at that time.
Yeah, I think so too.
So let's do this. It was helpful. I read over Trudy's notes and her outline, and that was very helpful.
Yeah.
So I know that there was some litigation. Y'all filed a new lawsuit. I guess it was around 15. 20.
And well, they didn't show up for court, and the judge dismissed it. But we had Jane Doe's on it because we knew that we were going to include, eventually more people. And the lawyer in California did not show up, and they dismissed the case.
Against Stan.
Against Stan. Against Stan Schneider. They all knew since 2012 that we were entitled to more. You know what I mean? Because they had already been through Travis's lawsuit.
So let's go back to the first lawsuit first. And this was the 20, I guess you filed it in 2010, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I want to understand why, given the facts, the things we talked about, which it's clear that the underpayment associated with Glen Campbell Music especially, those assets were transferred to another entity, Seventh Sons, that there were underpayments above and in addition to that. So I'm wondering why, when you had the lawsuit filed in 2010, that you didn't go on and pursue those prior years.
We didn't have the forensic accountant at that time. In discovery, what they did is they just brought in and they dumped like almost 15 to 20 boxes of just of old, ledgers and everything. And then we didn't have someone like Shannon Lynn. And basically, once we were starting to find everything out, I don't know, the settlement agreement, I think, was sealed. And I think I could get in trouble, but I can tell you the jigs of it. They ended up paying me over $400,000. And then they had said that they would pay Kelly and Kane as well. But Kelly never saw a dime of it.
Kim kept telling me that Travis owed them money. She didn't say that this lawsuit was finished.
What happened is once they figured out what we could potentially get into, They just offered me $400,000 to go away.
Yeah. And that's what I'm imagining happened is that commonly happens where you have one side of the table that it doesn't have as much information, or maybe they don't have the expertise. And then you have the other side of the table that has more financial resources. They have the inside scoop. And so you didn't know, on your side of the table, you didn't know the magnitude of this.
Yeah.
You didn't fully appreciate these transfers that had taken place and the money that ultimately could be traced back to Glen Campbell Music.
Right.
So my guess, I can imagine being an attorney representing Schneider would be to say, look, let's offer a settlement that would seem to you generous or attractive, and I know you're miserable going through this process anyway, and so you get maybe more money than you even hoped to get originally, or at least it was adequate to you, and you agree to not look further. But usually an essential element when that happens in litigation, and it happens a lot, is to include language that says
known or unknown.
Yeah, that you waive all.
That includes a known or unknown. Okay, up to that point, though, mind you.
Yeah, up to that point. Yeah, and I get you. So we'll talk about the future in a minute.
Yeah, okay.
But also the language that's used is that you waive any and all claims. This is in settlement of any and all claims that that have come up or might come up related to that subject matter. So I can see why that deal happened, why you agreed to it, because you couldn't imagine that there was all this other stuff. And I can see why they had an incentive to settle, because they didn't want you to go further down that discovery road.
Yep.
And mind you, when this happened, our attorney was on a contingency at that point. His name was Frank Haneke, and he was not an entertainment lawyer. As you well know, when we first presented this to an attorney, there's just so much information. It's almost impossible to digest in one sitting, as you well know.
I've experienced this actually.
So once he started getting involved, and mind you, at this point, to get Stan Schneider to do a deposition was impossible. It was like root canal. His wife was very sick at that time, which grant you, is an excellent excuse. And
she had pancreatic cancer, right?
Yes, yeah. But it was like impossible to get him to come in. And Frank Haneke, he was based out of San Francisco, so he would have to fly in to Los Angeles. And mind you, he's doing all of this on his own dime, because he only got a percentage of what I settled for. So when they offered the $400,000, they dumped all this stuff on us, and we didn't have a forensic accountant at that time. And he said, listen, he goes, it would cost me 10 to 15 grand just to hire someone to go through all this stuff. And we basically kind of knew what was there, but we didn't know all of that was there. Right, and then when they offered the $400,000, and mind you, this had been going on for a long time, and at this point, Dad was getting to the point to where his cognitive ability was declining,
Yeah.
And they even said, what, are you going to drag your dad in here to testify? I said, if it'll prove I'm right, yes, I will.
That's why I didn't join the suit originally with Travis, was because I didn't want to name my dad in the suit.
Well, and you may have also thought correctly that he could be pulled in to the case. So, but also, Kelly, I think that, again, like Travis, you didn't realize the magnitude of the money that was involved.
No idea.
No idea.
And then, see, at that time, mind you, with the known and unknown, what we didn't realize at that time is, Glen Campbell Music, we had a percentage of, and then Seven Sun was a spinoff. Dad signed Alan Jackson as a writer, and then so all of Alan Jackson's publishing rights were encompassed in Glen Campbell Music. And I didn't know this, but they had recently sold Alan Jackson back his publishing rights for several $1 million.
Yeah, and he bought the publishing rights back.
And then that's what I think they were scared of us getting into,
Yeah. They didn't want us to touch the millions that he got from Jackson.
So let me ask you this question, Travis.
Sure.
Your attorney, even though he wasn't familiar with that practice area, when he takes a case, he has a responsibility to do an adequate or a professional job, and that's the reason some lawyers don't take cases in areas that they're not qualified,
Proficient.
because it does mean that the standards of their profession, the rules of ethics require them to provide a level of service that is comparable. Maybe not, it'll cut them some slack if they're not a quote unquote specialist, but they're
Right.
still required to seek out the assistance. And that's the way the rules are written. You have a duty, if you're practicing it and you took a case of which you're not an authority, to bring in sufficient people to help you to assure that your client doesn't become a victim of the fact that you don't know much.
He did. He brought in someone that was in entertainment law to advise him and to advise us. And then after this drug on for a couple of years, the other person either retired or moved away. And again, we're friends with Frank Kaneki today.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And you've made it clear that you don't have any complaints against him.
No, I mean, honestly, at that time, I had no idea. I mean, what my purpose of that endeavor was to compel an accounting.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't give us any information. And then after that, once they paid me, I think it was $420. But once they paid me that amount, and then mind you, they actually deducted, because it was money that I had borrowed from my father when I was buying a house, but as it turns out, it was monies that was mine to begin with. Does that make sense? That I had no idea about. So they deducted, I think, like $90,000 off of the original figure, and it ended up being the $420 that they gave me. And then my attorney, of course, he read it to me, explained it to me, because it did contain the language, up to present day, anything known or unknown, and then that's one thing that I was concerned about. And then I just said, forget it. And then we were supposed to, at that time, start getting paid directly from Capital UMG, the royalties. And that 20% was supposed to stop, but it didn't. Obviously we didn't know that till later on.
So, but before we go past that settlement, that original settlement from we'll call it the 2010 lawsuit.
Settled in 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, settled in 12. So your attorney, though, he told you that, look, there's a lot we don't know here, and you wouldn't say he advised you to settle. So
no, he didn't. He didn't push me to settle.
Yeah.
He said this is what they're offering, and at that point, after it was costing me a fortune to go back and forth to LA, because I lived in Kansas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we would go there, and then he would come down for the deposition, and then 2 times he flew down to LA, and Stan couldn't make it, so it was like a wasted trip. And mind you, I understand that his wife was sick, but I was just so fed up at that time, going through the whole thing. And to tell you the honest truth, I was kind of pissed at Kelly too, because she wasn't really kind of a part of it that I felt she should have been, but
I
again,
can understand.
I wanted to do it 30 years ago right after my mom passed, and after
I understand where Kelly's coming from. And I love Kelly to death. Tim assured her that whatever I give Travis, I'll give you,
Yeah.
So why go through the headache and the expense of, having to go to LA and then all this and that,
So no, and this is a common scenario where you have siblings who one or more believe that there's a cause of action, and furthermore they believe and they're enthusiastic or willing to pursue it, and other siblings who either don't believe the cause of action exists, which was not the case here, but other who simply, for their own reasons, in this case, including the effects on your dad, didn't want to pursue it or weren't willing to pursue it. And so it creates friction between siblings.
Yeah.
And I can see how it's hard to get a united force sometimes. But this raises another question that was important to me in this discussion. Again, you've made it clear that Lawrence Turner, who is the trustee, that you seem to have no or few complaints, and perhaps you like him. But I'm looking at this as a lawyer from the outside. And the first thing that occurs to me when I look at this from 10,000 feet is the trustee is the one who has the duty, the fiduciary duty to protect the interest of the beneficiaries. And they're the ones who are supposed to go out and fight the fight, who are supposed to be vigilant for abuses and fraud and other things. In other words, it's their duty to initiate and pursue things that threaten the trust estate. So give me your comments about.
Exactly. You are 100% correct. We get along now with Larry kind of because we have to. He's Kane's power of attorney, more or less. Okay. And in a way we kind of have to. And then another thing I need to back up. Okay. The mom's trust, okay, it ended when we turned 40, was it, Kelly?
Yep.
Okay, it ended when we turned 40. Okay, when I first filed my action, Larry he put in a counterclaim saying that we did not have standing because he was the trustee and he's the one that supposed to file the action. He was incoherent for a stand. Then I proved that he wasn't the person over Kelly and I because we had already turned 40. And so the trust, in essence, even though we were part of it, because we were owners of the royalties, the trust, he only had, representation over Kane at that. I mean, does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And mind you, you are 100% correct because Larry had to pay as well. Larry didn't have insurance. Okay. Stan's insurance paid, and Larry piggybacked off of Stan's insurance to pay me my settlement. But with Larry, you're 100% correct. He had the fiduciary duty to do that. But since technically he was not the trustee for Kelly or I, you know what I mean?
At that point.
Technically right now, we still have an action against Larry. Okay, the new action we filed in 2015, we named Larry, Stan, and Gershie Schneider. Okay, we have not taken Larry off. He's very upset about that. He keeps telling us, listen, you need to dismiss this against us.
So wait, but before we go there, I want to stick with the earlier suit.
Sure.
And so as to that one, I'm guessing that your settlement waived also any and all claims against Larry Turner, yes, the trustee.
Yes.
And again, you entered into this settlement, though you had a lawyer, but you just didn't realize the magnitude of the monies that arguably were owed you.
Sure. I mean, I thought 400,000 was pretty substantial.
Yeah, right. And that's often the way these cases go when there's really a huge amount of money that is getting to avoid being identified, and that's the incentive to pay out something generous.
And mind you, I mean, you can probably tell just from talking with us throughout these, since we've been talking. I mean, I try my hardest. I mean, I try not to be like a little spoiled kid. You know what I mean? I totally respect and I appreciate everything my mother set up for us, and I take nothing for granted. But right. at that time, I just thought, wow, I mean, it had been going on. I mean, mind you, okay, like 2010. I mean, it seemed like forever going back and forth to LA. I mean, it cost us literally probably about $4,000 every time we went out there to go to court, between the airfare and the hotels and the hotel rooms out there and the car, and you know what I mean.
It was very expensive. And
and emotionally, you know what I mean?
I was drained. If it wouldn't have been for Trudy, I mean, God bless Trudy. I mean, I'm so blessed to have her in my life. If it wouldn't, I mean, I was so emotionally drained that honestly, all of this, everything that we have basically is due to Trudy. And I say that, I mean, not just blowing smoke up her rear, but it's the truth, because she's the one. I mean, right now she writes all our briefs. She's the one that saves everything. I mean, she's the one that got that Shannon involved. She's the one that got us, she's the one that got UMG to start paying us directly. I mean, we set up the bank account to where, we had to jump through hoops for UMG to send the funds to a central bank account, because they would split it in half, but they wouldn't split it in a third after that half.
Okay, so but one thing I'm curious about is, what would be the rough estimate? And I realize you don't know precisely, but how much money do you think that would have been owed you had all of the records come to the light of day and you all had received your 50% interest?
It probably would have been in the millions.
Oh, yeah, in the millions.
Yeah. And that's my thought based on just reading the numbers that I read, was that
because when we presented our suit again in 2015, I mean, I don't understand technically. I mean, I assume now Kelly's barred because of statute of limitations. But when we presented our suit in 2015, everything we try to calculate now, they start at 2012.
Yeah, because of the settlement.
Exactly.
But not with me or Kane, though. That was your case.
Yeah. That's true. And whatever statutory limit you might be looking at, Kelly, I'm sure it would not be affected by the settlement that was from 2012.
Exactly, because I had nothing to do with it.
That does raise a question, Kelly. Why are you not pursuing that?
I don't know. It's emotional. But now that my dad's been gone, and seeing how greedy basically Kim was, it would not bother me now to name Kim.
And Kim is his surviving wife.
Yeah, she did not have to do what she did. She could have said, she could have named us in the will. Travis, I give you my golf clubs. Kane, I give you my golfing caps. Kelly, you could have my T-shirts. But to take us out of the will, and it was Kim and Stan.
So, but I want you to explain that, because some people watching this are thinking, wait, that was Glen Campbell's decision, but explain what you mean.
All right. Everything was changed in 2006, 7. It was 2007 that the trust was made, and it was redone. My dad, I've got documents from 2002 where he was cognitive. I mean, he had cognitive impairment in 2002. I knew in the 90s something was wrong with my dad, but there were doctors that wanted him to have his brain examined. They knew that there were issues with it. And
on top of this, just a side note to this, see, this is another thing Trudy was great at. Okay, the documents that the will documents where it changed everything, it was only the last page that was signed. I mean, the bulk of it, the bulk of the changes was the majority of this document, and then his signature was on the last page. You know what I mean? So Dad signed pretty much anything they put in front of him. I mean, as long as he trusted, is it okay? I mean, he trusted Stan explicitly.
That document then was signed, his will or last trust was signed in 2007?
There were two of them. There was one in 2007 and then one a little bit later. And then, I mean, not to confuse everything, but after Dad passed, we filed a suit to contest the will. And then that's when we got all of that deposition with regard to Stan, which was beautiful stuff with regard to the 20% and all that. We ended up dropping it because even if, I feel bad for the rest for Debbie and for Dylan, my half brother and sister, not from Kim, because in Dad's will, they split it all, there's 6 of them. What is this, 8? No, there's 5 of them. and then supposedly they each get equal amounts, but theirs doesn't kick in. Kim changed it. It was supposed to. It was supposed to happen upon Dad's death, but Kim changed it to everything to kick into them upon her death.
Wait, let me stop you. So there are you all are the three children, Kane, Kelly, Travis. You're the three children from the first marriage.
It's actually the second marriage. Debbie, my older sister, is from the first marriage.
They were married for a very short time.
There's a child from the first marriage, Debbie. Yeah. And then these additional children you just mentioned are.
Okay, Dylan was from Sarah, and then there's Ashley, Cal, and Shannon.
Okay.
Ashley, Cal, and Shannon are from Kim.
Okay. And then, so that you're saying that changes were made that were more favorable to Kim's biological children.
Well, not necessarily. See, I didn't realize, but Dad had a separate insurance policy. I mean, we weren't privy to everything, but they each got like $1 million after Dad passed away. Each of their kids. But what was changed was the original text of the will said that, okay, all of them, excluding us, because Kim had us taken out only because she can't stand that we still get 50% of the checks that come in. You know, I'm sure it just drives her crazy.
Is that what explains the fact that you were largely written out?
I believe so. I believe so.
And you know, in your dad's defense, you know, I'm imagining, and perhaps you do too, that he may be thinking, okay, it's not that I don't love these kids, but I know that
they're already taken care of. They're already taken care of.
And Kim, and for Kim, that would be especially a bit of a sore spot.
Couldn't stand it. Okay, our good friend, her name's Patsy Webb. Jimmy Webb, who wrote most of Dad's songs, that was her ex. And Kim could find to Patsy, this is when they lived in Phoenix, this is a long, long time ago, that I got to leave Glenn. This was when Dad was out of control with the alcohol and all that.
Was that a Tanya Tucker period?
Yeah.
Well, it was right after that. It was right after Tanya when he married Kim. Okay, Kim got pregnant. He was
still with Tanya when he got together with Kim.
Kim got pregnant, and he did the gentlemanly thing and married her. But okay, after that, he was still kind of wild. And then Kim told Patsy, "I have to leave him, but I can't because Billy gets half of everything he makes. I'll get nothing if I leave him." You know.
Well, yeah, she'd have gotten, I guess, what would have ended up being a fourth, and really not that, because all the great songs were written, as you all have pointed out, during that period of your mother's marriage.
Mom, yeah, she had gotten an attaboy.
So, you know, what's funny is I remember an interview, and I think it was with your dad, that he was talking about, or one of his band members, that how he barely survived the Tanya Tucker period.
Yeah.
Apparently she was wild and she was a lot young. Wasn't she like 20 years younger?
Yeah. And we're still good friends with Tanya. And Tanya to this day regrets because Dad asked Tanya to marry her. And she said no. To this day,
it was probably good for both of them.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
That's why Kim kept having to have a new house, because the house that he bought when he got together with Kim, he had bought that house for Tanya.
I got to tell you something funny that he told me. He said, son, he says, don't get married. He said, just find someone you like and buy him a new house every couple of years.
Hey, so now I want to try to be a little bit objective here.
Sure.
And I think you will agree. So given the low point that he was at, so Kim comes along, and did she have some influence in his, cleaning up his life at that stage? I'm assuming she did.
Yes, she did. I mean, she did. But Dad, mind you,
we worked all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
I lived there 12 years. The year I left, Tio was only home it was like 36 days out of that entire year. I mean, he just worked and worked and worked.
And again, mind you, I mean, I try, as a Christian, and I believe in God, Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, but I try to forgive Kim, but it's really hard to forget, and with all the things that she does. I mean, she tries to espouse herself as a Christian, but that her actions prove otherwise in so many times. But again, my whole point of this isn't a rag on Kim. You know, I mean, it's just, I mean, it was to the point to where, okay, mind you, she was a good influence on Dad. I mean, granted, I mean, I'm sure she got him to stop. But even later on, when Dad, I mean, as Kelly said, I could kind of tell when Dad was going down, because when we're playing golf, he'd tell the same joke.
That's when I knew something was wrong. For my dad to repeat a joke.
When I feel sorry for Dad is when, okay, we're playing golf. Yeah. I mean, he didn't drink at that point, to go get wasted and sloppy drunk, but he enjoyed a glass of wine or something. And we're driving in the golf cart, and he asked his son, he said, run up to the snack shop and please get me a glass of wine in a styrofoam cup. And I'm looking at him, and he says they have explicit instructions that if any of these people at the country club serve me alcohol, Kim will have them fired. And I mean, at that point, I kind of felt sorry for Dad.
So they got married. What year was it that Kim and your dad married?
83.
Give or take a year, we'll say.
Yeah.
So thereafter, is it safe to say that there wasn't much of a decline in your dad in terms of the quality of his lifestyle? Meaning he didn't drink heavily after that, or having drug problems of any sort. Is that true?
See, no, he did. I mean, he did, because that's why they left Phoenix. Okay. He loved Phoenix. Dad didn't. He hated the cold. But what happened was he was leaving the golf course one day, and I guess he was sick and taking something, and then he had like, I guess, a couple of drinks, and he got a DUI on the way home from the country club. And when he pulls up at the house, he ended up having to go to, I don't know if you remember Joe Cordell, the sheriff of Phoenix or whatever. He was quite kind of a name or whatever. But anyways, Joe Arpaio, I think it was. But anyway, yeah. So anyways, she was so embarrassed after that they moved from Phoenix to Malibu. I mean, she was so embarrassed. But Dad is such a good sport. Afterwards, after he had everything settled, I think he had to do like a day in jail. He put a concert on for the inmates there in Phoenix, for the people in jail. He put a concert on, and then, mind you, and again, I try not. It's not a rag on Kim, but they built this house at the Biltmore Estates from the ground up. Okay, and he lived right next to Alice Cooper, real couple doors down.
Now, this is in Phoenix.
Yeah, in Phoenix.
Okay,
and anyway, so she built this house from the ground up. A couple years later, she didn't like it, so she destroys the top floor and like rebuilds a house that was just built, and it frustrated Dad to no end. I mean, I remember going in there, and he goes, I don't even have a room for me in here, So
Alice Cooper, incidentally, had a lot of kind things. I mean, he loved Dad. Almost worshipful of your dad's ability and his talent.
Him and Ted Nugent. I have a picture that I'll send to Farah of Dad, Ted Nugent, and Alice. And Alice Cooper every around Christmas time, he would do a benefit concert for the homeless people or underprivileged people in Phoenix, and he would get all his rocker friends to come in. Ted Nugent, the people from Styx, and Alice said that he said here are like some of the most accomplished rock guitarists in the world. They're on stage, and then here comes up Country Glen and just blows them all away, on the guitar.
I'm telling you, I still watch those YouTube videos of your dad's on stage performance.
Yeah.
And at some point, I want to come to pick up in general terms, not real specific terms, because I know you don't know the real specifics, and I don't have copies of the documents relating to the litigation after, say, 2015.
Okay.
But I have read some notes, and I have an overview of it. So let's just touch on it gently here. Sure. So we talked about what happened up through 12, and so that settlement is in place. And then later you all realize that you're still not being paid the money that you should have been paid. And I think I'll see if I can identify the complaints. One relates to there was still the 20% that was being withheld as effectively a service charge by Schneider and his firm.
Any money that they distributed to us was take 20% off the top.
Yeah. Okay. So there was that issue. There was still the fact that there was monies you're not receiving for what was the Glen Campbell Music, Inc., and had since become Seventh Sons, and then apparently was transferred from that to other persons or entities. So you still weren't aware of any of that because you settled the 2012 suit without knowing how much there was out there that wasn't being paid. And then additionally, the Capitol Music royalties, you were not receiving those as promised.
Directly. I mean,
Directly.
we received it through the
incorrect
office.
amount. We were only being paid for 30 songs when we should have gotten 384.
There were 420 songs that we weren't being paid on.
Yeah.
So this came to what triggered your decision after settling the 2012 lawsuit? Somehow you all came to the realization, I think, that there was more there. Plus, of course, they weren't honoring the things I just mentioned, and perhaps in addition to others, that prompted you to file this suit. But what was the triggering event to where you filed? And Kelly, did you join that suit?
That was in 2015 against Stan.
What triggered it?
I mean, I felt that Stan, he owed me money. And my father, he was already pretty far gone in the nursing home. So, it was only against Stan.
Right. You knew your dad wouldn't get pulled into it at that point.
Oh, yeah. No, he was completely, he couldn't even talk for the last few years. I mean, it was horrible.
So you all brought the action, and again, Stan was named. Was Kim wasn't named, was she?
Kim was not named, no.
Okay.
But because Kim and I were still friendly then.
Yeah.
Now, Travis and Debbie sued for for Kim not to be a conservator. I was not involved with that suit,
It was almost the same reason as the 2010 suit, because we asked for the statements, the royalty statements that they received from UMG. They wouldn't give them to us.
And the UMG / Capitol monies all related to the songs that were outside Glen Campbell Music. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
That's two totally different entities. Yeah.
His mechanical rights. Performance. Okay. I mean, I think they're called mechanical royalties.
Okay.
Because he wrote some of his songs, but see, in Glen Campbell Music and Seventh Son, there was probably 300 songs that they owned the publishing rights to. You understand, where if a song's played, you get money off the mechanical, whoever's singing it, plus the publishing, whoever wrote it.
Okay, this concludes episode 1. Where there are 2 episodes, as we told you coming in which Kelly and Travis talk about these very complicated issues and challenges that they face since their mother's death. And we pick up from that episode 1 on the following episode, which if you need to review 1, do that before 2 in order for 2 to make the most sense. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something. Thank you.
You've been listening to Life's Third Act.